So I wanted to give a quick overview of who Elucian is. We're a software company that hosts for institutions across the world, but also provides the software for them to use it at their campuses. And in the United States, we have approximately 80 campuses, just like GCC, where we are the IT staff at that campus. So let's get the slide going here. There we go. I'm Mike. I run our security incident threat and manage security incident management and security incident threat teams. That basically means we handle InfoSec incidents and manage them for corporate Elucian, for our cloud hosting space, and for our customers like GCC. But also, um, we look at the security vulnerabilities in our products and um, basically review those and assist our product teams in making our products more secure. And then standard InfoSec support that any modern corporation would have these days. So there's three security teams within Elucian that a normal large business like us would have, and then there's a fourth application team, obviously because we produce software. Um, there's a team that performs architecture and engineering. They deploy antivirus. They scan our systems for vulnerabilities, things like that. There's my team, which kind of I gave an example of, but we're the guys going out and finding the zero-day attacks. Um, we're performing forensic analysis within our hosted space or our corporate environments to try and find, the bad guys navigating laterally through it, and then of course address the defects within our own software products. And John will speak to the last team, which is the security risk and compliance team. But our application security team is extremely valuable. Because again we put software in the cloud and provide it for on-prem licensed customers. We have to perform a lot of security testing within that code against that code before it ever goes public. And if something ever is found in the wild, we have to be able to close that gap very, very quickly. So Greg asked, what, how do we address cybersecurity risks against anything? So I decided to go ahead and use our cloud environment. We host all of our software in Amazon Web Services. And this kind of segues actually to John because, when we have attacks coming in, we identify those attacks. We have countermeasures to protect ourselves against them. But if something does actually make it through the security architecture wall, which is represented here, we're able to quickly contain, respond to, and uh, effectively bring those countermeasures back around. What caused the incident, and very quickly close that gap. And so, John will talk about his team, but they're extremely important. They're effectively the glue that keeps this wall together, to make sure that everyone at Elucian is doing the things they're supposed to be doing to keep the vulnerabilities patched, to keep the code defects, pre-production, to make sure that correct libraries are used. All those things that the controls that John looks for are the things that keep basically these risks and threats out. So, John.
Yep. Thanks, Mike. So my name is John Robinson, as the slide indicates, and I work with the Security Risk and Compliance team. And essentially, we have four functions overall that I'd like to describe quickly. The first is security risk assessments. Now, this takes place in multiple environments. One of them is sites like Genesee, where we do run the IT shop. Now, for that, my role and responsibility is to conduct risk assessments to gauge the security profile of the site, basically to see how secure they are and where any gaps exist, and to work with the on-site teams to try to remediate those gaps, to make them stronger. We also provide risk documentation for the corporate side, and that's in the way of policies and standards and the like, which comes up to the next thing. On an annual basis, we review all of our policies and standards to make sure they are up to date and that they are also reflecting any new threats that have come upon us. For example, 3 years ago, even 4 years ago or so, ransomware was not so much of a thing as it is today. Now it's all encompassing. You can hardly pick up a periodical or any kind of IT trade online magazine, e-zine, or whatever you want to call it, without seeing some kind of article about ransomware. As a result, we had to slightly modify some of our policies and standards to incorporate any of the defenses that are required against ransomware. And which bleeds into the next item I want to talk about is the security awareness programs that we run in the company. Now, these cover many items, many different formats, but one of special note is phishing campaigns. And phishing, as you may be aware, are those emails that come in that try to exercise social engineering, try to get you to release some kind of information to the individual who sent the phishing email, or the phisher, whatever you want to call them. And these could be asking for credentials. There are phishing campaigns from phishers that try to get financial gain. There's one of note is called the BEC, which is Business Executive Compromise, and that is more like a spear phishing email. The difference between phishing and spear phishing is that the spear phishing campaign or email is much more targeted to a specific individual, as opposed to just a general mass email phish campaign. So we do these awareness programs, again, to help educate our employees against any of the threats that are out there. Okay. So Mike, do you have anything else going on there that you want to talk about? Some of the teams there?
Let's see here.
Oh.
So yeah, that was yours.
Yeah.
So no, there's actually one recommendation. You know, I not only have I been doing this with Ellucian for a very long time, but prior to that, I worked for the University System of Georgia as a criminal investigator and as a sheriff's investigator in the Atlanta area, dealing with cybercrime and digital forensics. And the one thing I can recommend to college kids is be cognizant of what you're putting on social media, because employers are looking and they will find it. There's services out there that, you know, just if, you know, if you wouldn't show your mom and dad, then don't put it on social media, because it can affect your future employment.
I think we basically covered the highlights, the high level topics of what our respective teams do, not only for the corporation Ellucian, but for the schools that we work with on the different levels, whether we're on site or just in general, securing the software that we provide. So does anyone have any questions for either Mike or myself?
This is Greg. First off, thank you again, John and Mike, for your time and expertise. So, you know, obviously, as you said, that part of your job is to help assess risks and help to avoid those risks and to remediate those risks to colleges like GCC. And also common that we tend to just hear the bad news when things happen that don't go well. We don't get the stories like, hey, we just prevented XYZ from happening. But with that in mind, are there some either in general or some things from GCC that have kind of stood out in your mind as like, yeah, here was an issue that we were able to avoid or fend off, or to kind of keep it from getting any worse than it may have initially?
Not that I am aware of at present, Mike.
Yeah, yeah. That actually, I heard a saying years ago that we have to be right in what we do. We have to be right 100% of the time, and the bad guy only has to be right one time. So, there, to that point, I've seen GCC for over a decade, and schools just like GCC throughout the United States. And 10 years ago, there were controls in place that just wreaked havoc. And it wasn't necessarily with the technology or the staff, or it was the mindset of the institution. Uh, that the IT department took a back seat. The technology wasn't going to be paid for. That attitude did propagate. But after a decade or so, when the students are demanding the right technologies in place, and the attitude of protecting the students' data like you protect them has propagated throughout the industry. I'm seeing less and less mistakes happening with registrars, with secretaries of department heads, right? That kind of protect the students' data attitude is actually getting much better in higher education as a whole. So I'm very proud of that, and pleased to see that.
And just to add on to that, as terrible as this situation we're in now, the pandemic, has been, um, I hate to say the one benefit, but in being forced to work remotely, we have seen a sharp increase in security awareness as far as educating faculty, staff, and students as far as the need to be secure in what you connect to remotely. And I only see that increase as we go forward. So that's a good thing to see, that that education is being pushed out across the board, quite frankly. Pretty much every school that I've spoken to, and I speak to schools on a weekly basis, that they are seeing a marked increase in awareness, which is very, very important.
So this is awareness among the faculty, the staff, and students?
And students, everybody, yes. I mean, it varies from school to school, but overall, yes, all three populations are being exposed to the need to be more secure when they're online.
And as you mentioned with the COVID situation, and that more people are having to work remotely, and that's staff, student, and faculty, are there some particular challenges that people should be aware of when they are making those connections from home into systems here or into other cloud or remote systems?
Yes. As far as challenges, well, early on, a lot of the technology was, I'll say, new to the individual users. They weren't as familiar with different kind of collaboration tools such as Zoom or whatever the product somebody was using. Adobe has something. Cisco has something. They all have something. Blue Jeans, once upon a time, was also a player in this. So people began to understand different things about the need to be careful when using these. For example, one issue was, and Zoom has gotten better as we progressed over the easily last 6 months, because there was one point where there was an issue that somebody could just join a session unknown to other people, okay? Basically be rather kind of surreptitious within that presentation or meeting or whatever it was that was going on. And soon people realized that, and until Zoom fixed it, which they did, people just tried to be very careful as far as monitoring their sessions. Okay, so the thing about security, it mirrors technology in that it's constantly evolving. As long as the technology is going to evolve, security has to evolve with it. Okay, and when security has to evolve, awareness and the knowledge or education of those security tenets also must increase.
I think one observation with employees, with whole working populations going remote, are unmanaged devices. So historically, in a network, a standard corporate or institutional network, you had trusted devices operating within the walls or confines of that campus, right? But now with everyone working remote, you now are allowing people's personal managed systems, right? The stuff that they go buy at Best Buy or Walmart, and they're able to use that to pop into the firewall and perform work within that, that virtual campus. There's some risk associated with that, and we have seen not just in higher ed, but in healthcare and other industries where that historically were campus centric, who were forced to move remote, a ransomware uptick because unmanaged devices are now being trusted within the confines of that virtual institution.
And especially towards that, pardon me, the thing about untrusted devices, or they're commonly known as BYO, bring your own device, BYOD, is that they're not, unlike managed devices that are run by the institutions, the IT shops for the institutions. Unmanaged devices, or people's individual personal devices, do not necessarily get the updates they need on a regular basis, which is the concern for IT staffs, because it's very possible that somebody goes to a site, pulls down some malware, pardon me, because their antivirus hasn't been updated, or their machine hasn't been patched to cover that particular vulnerability. And so now they have it, and when they go to connect to their institution's network, the environment, there's a problem, and they can easily transfer that malware into the institution's network, thereby infecting the entire, the entire environment. And I can easily talk to, let's say, ransomware. Okay, that's clearly a major example of that. Okay.
It seems that all your guys' actions, it has to be based on like a defense. Are there resources you guys have that as a collaboration, like to be offensive, like to get in front of it before the attack comes? Like how does that work?
Yeah, so half my team is that's basically what threat management is identifying a security incident before it actually happens, right? So we define threats as critical vulnerabilities with known exploits, where actors are out in the world, performing this against organizations. But we have we have a dark. We investigate intelligence through both groups like IT ISAC, REN ISAC, InfraGard, um, various DOJ supported organizations, and are able to kind of use that intelligence to then go ahead and proactively look for issues within the environments to make sure that nothing bad can actually happen.
Good. Oh, that's good. Thank you.
And also, excuse me, part of my responsibility when I go to the sites, there are known security controls that should be in place, and these controls address certain types of issues that can result from a hacker or malware or what have you. And so part of my responsibility when I go to sites like Genesee is to ensure that these controls are in place and are functioning, which is how we try to prevent issues from occurring.